Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Limited Level Up's Modern Horizons 3 Common and Uncommon Set Review. I'm Alex, joined as always by Marc Anderson. Marc, always great to have you back. How's it going?
I love being here. Thanks so much for continuing to put up with me, and can't wait to dive into these cards.
It's more than put up with you. We love having you. I love having you. Chat loves having you. And we've got a really cool one this time around. Modern Horizons 3. Did you play the last two Modern Horizons sets in any capacity? I know you weren't playing exactly at that time, I don't think, but have you played since?
No, so I have not touched either Modern Horizon set. So this is going to be, it's still a Magic set, but
Mm-hmm.
somewhat new ground for me.
Yeah, so it's for those who haven't touched any Modern Horizons, haven't touched any other supplemental sets, have no idea, like maybe this is a little bit intimidating. Basically, what you would expect from Modern Horizons 3 is higher power level across the board. There's just going to be commons and uncommons and rares that they wouldn't really feel comfortable printing in a standard legal set where they have to balance the cards for standard play. These cards are going directly to modern, and if you're playing on Arena, of course, timeless and brawl and historic and all of that. So you're going to get common removal spells that are super efficient. You're going to get common threats that are really efficient. It's a little bit higher complexity, but actually one of the things I noticed going through this set is I think it's a little bit less complex compared to the previous Modern Horizon sets. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but there are not as many different mechanics in this set as they are in previous Modern Horizons. Like I think last time in Modern Horizons 1, there was like 50 something named mechanics. They've really batched them all together. So there's a core group of mechanics, just like you'd see in any other draft set. And then you'll see some other mechanics sprinkled here and there that honestly, once you read them once, are pretty straightforward and won't be too hard. Anything else that you want to add on to that, just as far as differences that you might have noticed compared to a normal draft set?
I to touch on the point you just said, I think you might be slightly biased having been familiar with all of
For
the
sure.
keywords, because
I
I'm pretty
agree.
sure there's still like over 40 different keywords that they've brought back here.
Yes, I guess my point is that in older Modern Horizon sets, it was like they didn't really have too much. Well, here's here's energy, and there's going to be like 40 energy cards or something. There was some of that stuff here and there, but most of it was just like here's a mechanic, and here's a mechanic, and here's a mechanic, and here's a mechanic. So all I'm saying, I guess, is if you have played other Modern Horizon sets, it's going to be a tone down from that. But if you haven't, it's going to definitely be a big step up as far as different named mechanics go.
Yeah, I heard Ben on your friendly competitor, Lords of Limited, describe this as kind of an entryway into Cube because
Mm-hmm.
it introduces a lot of mechanics to players, but it's still a fresh set for everybody. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. Like if you are somebody who's maybe just played for a year or two and just tried out a couple sets, it might be a little bit intimidating to dive headfirst into this and see so many words that you're not familiar with. But it is still brand new interactions for everybody, unlike something like Cube, where people have been practicing that kind of thing for decades. So everyone's starting at ground zero, and anyone who's here is already going to be a leg up when they're beginning on week one.
Exactly. And the advice that I've been giving to people is if you're going into this set and you're just, before your first draft, if you don't already do this before you draft for your first time, I think it would very much benefit you to read the cards just so you have a good idea of what's going on here, because there are a few more words on these cards than normal. I know some people really don't like that. I don't like this so much. I love reading a good long novel magic card. But yeah, that's something that I think is good to prepare yourself for if that's something that you want to do. So let's just jump into action. Before we do that, I just want to give a quick rundown, the set review, housekeeping stuff like we usually do. If you have been with us for set reviews before, you can probably skip forward for the next minute. But if you haven't, the order that we're going to be going in is gold cards, including gold commons. There's a cycle of gold commons in this set. And then colorless cards, and then lands, and then all the colors in Wooburg order. Once we get to the colorless cards, we're going to be going forward, or I guess even in the gold cards too. But we're going to go talk about the commons and then the uncommons, group those together. And within those groups, we go mana value order. So starting from the lowest to the highest. There is a sort of bonus sheet in this set where the bonus sheet, you're going to get one per pack, is a reprint into modern, which means it's a card that has existed before, but it was not modern legal before. Usually it's going to be a card from a really old set or from a commander product that they want to put into modern. And we're going to save those for the end like we would for a normal bonus sheet. I think that's about it. Anything else?
Well, yeah, kind of touching on that.
Yeah.
Did you have something you wanted to start with on the pack composition?
Oh yeah, let's just do that now. That's a great call, Mark here. So
Yeah,
we will.
not my first set review,
Yeah,
Alex.
it's not your
It's
first set review. So yeah, let's do. Let's see. Is there? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so as you can see here, we don't have a nice graphic this time around. WotC did not make one for us, unfortunately. But the pack layout in this set is pretty straightforward. You're gonna get 6 commons, Modern Horizons commons, just regular ones. You're gonna get 3 uncommons, like in most boosters, including double face cards. There are a lot of double face cards in this set. I believe all of them are the modal double face cards. Almost all of them. There's some exceptions, but almost all of them are the modal double face cards where there are spells in the front, lands in the back. There's not a specific spot for that. Those are just kind of mixed in with the uncommons. You're gonna get 1 rare or mythic, of course. There are the special guests and that kind of stuff that are very, very, very rare. Like you saw in the last few sets, some examples of those. If you don't know what we're talking about, from OGJ was like Mystic Snake and Notion Thief and Desert, the actual card Desert. If you didn't see those, that's because they're really rare. We're going to talk about them tomorrow, but don't worry, they're not going to be cards that you have to worry too much about. And then there is that one new to modern card slot that there's going to be 20 uncommons, 18 rares, 4 mythic rares, kind of the normal breakdown of a bonus sheet. And I think that is actually it, unless I missed something.
Yeah, this is, I think you're copying this from what I sent you. This is actually not the full list of what's in a pack.
Oh, okay.
Because this is only what, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is only 11 cards.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of this, they still have the 2 wild card slots, like any regular
Right.
play booster set. So
Yep.
it just could be a duplicate, could be another rare, could be another common. And then on top of that, the basic land slot in this set is 50% of the time a basic land, and 50% of the time a regular set common.
Yeah, I just had that up on screen here, the play booster layout without Mark here, unfortunately. But if this is all going over your head, don't worry. We're just including this for the folks that really like to know the super nitty gritty of how this stuff is laid out. And I do think it is pretty helpful to know. But without further ado, why don't we get to our first card, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick us off this
Yeah.
time, I guess. We have Riddlegate Gargoyle, which is a blue-white gold card. It is a 2/2 flying artifact creature. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy, which is one of the main mechanics in this set. And these are energy counters that basically you keep them. They stay off to their side, but they're not on the battlefield or anything like that. They're just used to be spent later. And this creature also has the ability, whenever you attack, you may pay 2 energy. When you do, target creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn.
Yeah, worth noting, you are the person that gets the counters. They actually go on you, which is relevant for proliferate reasons, which is in this set. So you're going to kind of see how the archetypes are shaped as we get into it. But for the energy mechanic, it's taken up by blue-white, red-white, and blue-red. So kind of the Jeskai shard. And each one has a little bit of a different flavor to them. But for blue-white, they've named it as the flying energy deck. I don't know exactly how much that is going to be relevant when you're drafting, but Riddlegate Gargoyle here kind of is emblematic of that. Pretty solid card, and I think a pretty good example of the power level you're going to see at common in the set. We've got a 2-mana 2/2 flyer that gives you a resource and gives you a way to spend that resource, and lifelink, just throwing around lifelink. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, so I didn't play with energy. It was one of the sets where I was taking my break from limited.
Mm-hmm.
But correct me if I'm wrong on this. My understanding, the fact that you get energy is excellent, but don't just read it as the second ability is how you spend it, because energy is really scales depending on your best way to maximize it in your entire deck. So if you have a bunch of these gargoyles that are making energy, that 3 energy, sure, it could give you, lifelink a bunch of times and swing a race, and maybe that's exactly what you need, but it could do other things as well. So other cards that allow you to spend energy would still let you use the energy produced by this card. And so you might have some really strong effect that really wants energy, where this is kind of the enabler for that.
Yes, exactly. And I think that when you're in an energy deck, it definitely behooves you to get more cards that make energy, and most of them, if not all of them, like all the cards that give you energy, they also have a way to spend the energy, and not quite the other way. I think there are some cards that let you spend energy but don't make it, but it's kind of hard to end up being like, oh, I have all this energy and nothing to do with it. You're always going to have outlets, but like Mark just said, there are some outlets that are better than others. So our gargoyle friend here, it's in grading. By the way, for the grades, I do want to say that yes, we're going to be still using, of course, the limited resources style A2F letter grading system, and it's going to be it's gonna scale with the set, right? When you're grading things, we're not talking about like what would this be compared to in a normal set. We're still gonna think about it in this set. What does the C look like? What does your average card look like? And where do you think Real Gay Gargoyle falls in that scale after knowing most of the set? We have looked at it, by the way.
Yeah, so a lot of these gold cards are a lot more linear than some of the play booster sets we've been in recently.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's somewhat risky to like, kind of first pick these and take them as your direction. You probably want to aim to be like one color, maybe your white or blue in your first couple picks. And then seeing one of these gold cards like mid pack ish, I think is kind of your guide to be like, okay, my second color is going to be these two. And then I'm going to kind of do the thing as hard as I can. And this seems like a really nice reward. Like if you're the only blue white drafter at the table and you can potentially table these, you're going to be really happy with that.
Yeah, for sure. And just I want to touch on something you said here with the mechanics or the archetypes are a little more linear. For just to spell it out, what exactly that means is that you're going to want to have, once you know you're the energy deck, you're looking for the energy cards, right? You're not looking for like random, pretty solid white common. You're going to play some non-energy cards, of course, but energy especially is a mechanic that the more you have, the better it gets. You're very incentivized to go down that path once you start going down it. And so the archetypes might be a little bit less flexible than you might be used to in some other draft formats.
So I think like, assuming you're blue white, I think this thing's excellent. I want to give it like a B minus.
Mm-hmm. Yep, B minus, exactly what I was going to give for the Real Gay Gargoyle. Let's go on to the next card. And by the way, these early cards, when we talk about new mechanic or just like expounding on the things that are going on in the set, we take a little bit longer than usual just so we can get some baselines out there. As we go on, it gets to, pick up the pace a little bit. All right, next up, we've got the blue-white uncommon here. This is Emissary of Soulfire. It's 1 blue-white for a 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy counters. You can pay 2 energy counters to put an Exalted counter on target creature you control. Activate this only as a sorcery, and an Exalted counter gives Exalted to a creature. And the Exalted, if you haven't played with it before, is whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each instance of Exalted amongst permanents you control. So you can have just like a random 1/1 with Exalted, and when you have something else attack alone, like your 2/2 flyer, your gargoyle, for example, that'll get +1/+1. But it has to attack alone.
Yeah, but notably, like there's already just from these first 2 cards, if you have both of these in play, you get, 6 energy, and you can spend them in 3 different, like 3 chunks, 2 different ways, and kind of figuring out what you want to do with those. Do you want to give 2 of your creatures Exalted and then lifelink and then get in with a big hit? You can even put multiple Exalted counters on the same creature and they will stack. So you could potentially just give something multiple Exalted counters and then have it grow and be in its attacker. And then do you want that creature to be the one that has the Exalted counters or something that's not getting into combat? So there's a lot of depth to this that may not immediately be apparent from first glance.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to actually, one of the things about this set, with so many different words on these cards and so many interesting interactions, all these mechanics, is in most set reviews, I think we do a pretty good job of covering 80%, maybe a little bit more or less, give or take, of what you need to know about the cards and the interactions. I can pretty confidently say that we're not going to be able to cover all the interactions between the cards because there's so many things that are going to come up because there's just more words on the cards and more ways the cards can interact. So what Mark just said there, I think like just looking about like how to find those little interactions, where to put what, that's the stuff you're going to learn as you go through the set. And it's the stuff that we're hoping to lay out the building blocks here, but we're not going to be able to point out every single thing. So as far as grading goes, how do you like the Emissary?
The fact that both of these give 3 energy, I think, is huge because you'll kind of notice that the ways to spend energy are mostly in chunks of 2 or 3. And so getting that third one up front where you can kind of bank it for a card later that asks you for 3 energy, I think is really big. I don't know how often you're going to be putting Exalted counters on things, but the fact that you can kind of store it up and then decide, okay, I can kill my opponent in 2 turns in the air, I'll just make a huge flyer. I like this card, but slightly less than the Gargoyle. I was going to give it a C plus.
Yep, that's what I was gonna give it to. And I think if you want to have a pretty decent analog to how Exalted plays, it's almost like mercenary tokens from OTJ, where you've just got this one thing that sits there and helps your other creatures attack a little bit better. So if you just want a little bit of a gameplay comparison, I think that's a decent one. All right, now we move on to our first double face card. So there is one for each gold card, or for each color pair in this set, and we've got a spell on one side and a dual land on the other for these uncommons, which is pretty cool. Or for these gold hybrid uncommons. So the first one here for the blue-white is Suppression Ray. This is 3 Hybrid Azorius. It's a sorcery at uncommon, and says tap all creatures target player controls. You may pay X energy, then choose up to X creatures tapped this way, put a stun counter on each of them, and of course the back is a blue-white tapped dual land.
Yeah, so this could be. I mean, the backside isn't a lot of reading, which is nice, but this could still be a long set review because there's a lot to say about a lot of these cards.
Definitely.
These ones in particular with the duels, they're all hybrid on the front side. So you're if you're blue white, right? Like you're never cutting these, and they're probably going to be reasonably high picks. But I do think it's worth distinguishing which one you're taking as basically it's almost always going to be a dual land, and then maybe there's a little bit of upside, compared to which ones have such a powerful effect on the front side that they're worth taking as a spell, and you might need to figure out your mana some other way.
Mm-hmm.
And then which ones maybe even might be good enough that you'll play these in only one of these decks colors, right? Like would you play this in like a red-white deck, for example?
Right. This one probably not.
Yeah, this one probably not, but that's like having sleep on a spell is exactly the kind of high impact card you want to see in the mid game, where you don't necessarily need the land because you've already got 5 lands out. You draw this, and instead of being a dual land that's tapped, it's like a game winning spell. So it's very powerful.
Yes. I think that if you have not played with these cards, these spells in the front, lands in the back, it's pretty easy to underrate just how good it is to have that flexibility of your expensive finisher being just a land that's good in the early game. And then I've had a lot of questions about replacing lands with these. How many, like, what's the heuristic for how many spells do you play over, or how many lands do you take out for your mold double face cards? Like, do you take out 1-to-1? Is it like a 2-to-1 ratio? It's a little bit more of an art than a science, but I think you can fairly safely take out like the first land for your first modal double face card. The second one probably as well. Once you get to 3, it gets a little bit clunky with a lot of tap lands, but even still, there's a lot of situations where you're just going to want to have a deck with all the really good modal double face cards you pick up. You can also go to more lands. Like the more double face cards you have, the more lands you want to play. So playing an 18th land because you've got 3 or 4 of these modal double face cards, that's something that you're going to be interested in a lot. So we're going to kind of, note things here and there. There's not hard and fast rules, but like I said, I think you can easily swap the first land in for one of these.
Yeah, I'm also curious to see, not to detract from what we're doing, but land count cuts and adds is something that I'm always interested in hearing Sam Black's opinion on after him re-educating people on stuff like the LTR land cyclers. Mm-hmm. And so but yeah, I totally agree. First couple probably just replace the land, but the better the spell is, the more likely you'd rather have the land in play to cast it already. Yep. So you don't want to go too low on lands.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. So I think we're going to be giving reasonably high grades to these modal double face cards, or at least I want to. I'm curious if you are a little bit lower on them, but I think just being very powerful inherently, I want to start them as pretty high picks. I'm going to give Suppression Ray a B-.
Yeah, I was thinking B- as well.
Yep.
My, grading heuristics kind of don't work for these because I use them on percentage of times that will make your deck, and I think like all of these probably almost always make all of your decks. But it's kind of whether you're willing to take them early or whether you're going to try and wheel them and not take any real cards over them. And this one's good enough, you're going to take pretty high.
Yes, exactly. I think that's for our set review purposes, something that it's probably good for us to point out is like, this is a spell that's you would just be happy to put in your deck. Rather than there's some that it's like, it's a little overcosted. You don't really want that as much. Okay, what's up next?
Next we have Sneaky Snacker. This is the blue-black common, so this is a 2/1 flying fairy rogue. And when you draw your third card in a turn, return Sneaky Snacker from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
Right. So blue black is sort of a standalone color pair where it's not really doing something that any of the other color pairs are doing. It's, as you can see here, when you draw your third card, something good happens, or you can activate an ability or something. It's kind of built as a control deck. It sort of reads to me as something that they were like, oh, blue black needs to be doing something. I guess we should name it something and give it some sort of synergy. So I think jury is still going to be a little bit out on how supported this is and how often you should be drafting it. But again, we see common power level pretty high here. 2 mana, 2/1 flyer that comes back if you fulfill a not too hard requirement in this set. Like, it's not going to happen all the time, but as you're going to see with our next card, there are cards to support the draw 3 theme.
Yeah, there's not a ton of ways to do this like repeatedly, which makes sense. It's not, if you're drawing 3 or more cards every turn of the game would be reasonably quick. But I think this is more designed where on most games you're going to trigger this like every 3 or 4 turns. And I still think this is going to be pretty good as just a 2/1 flying with like free flashback kind of. It's still going to be pretty good.
Yeah, there's a cool. Once we get to black, there's a common that plays pretty well with this. Is like your classic Village Rites, Corrupted Conviction effect. Sacrifice the creature, draw 2. So you can sacrifice the Sneaky Snacker. You've drawn 2. You draw 1 from your draw step. You get it back immediately. So those are the kind of things you're going to see in this set a lot. Just these little 2-card combos. I like this less though, I think, than the Gargoyle, because to make a 2/1 flyer or 2 power flyer comparison. I think of the Snacker a C+.
Yeah, I had already written that for myself too.
Great. All right, and the uncommon here, Horrid Shadow Spinner, 1 blue-black for a 2/3 lifelink. When it attacks, you may draw cards equal to its power. If you do, discard that many cards.
Yeah, so the joke here, of course, is this will get you up to 3 cards drawn for the turn and does so repeatedly. So this is one of the few ways where you can actually potentially every turn trigger blue-black's theme. But yeah, don't be fooled. There's not like a ton of these. This is one of the only ones that does it repeatedly.
Right. 3 mana, 2/3 lifelink, fine. That's something I think we'd be a little more excited about in a regular set, and even then, it's just like fine. And the looting's really good. Like, that's a lot of cards you're seeing. Even just, forget about triggering your things, drawing 2, discarding 2. A lot of good filtering there. Putting stuff in the graveyard, something that's going to be relevant for some cards too.
Yeah, the fact that it has an attacks trigger and doesn't like brawl really well, right? Like it's not likely to be able to get in on turn 3. It has like you'd rather it be a 3/2 than a 2/3, so at least you're trading with something. It doesn't have any evasion, and like blue black's not really known for having a ton of, combat tricks or ways to augment creatures like we're going to see in the other color pairs, so I'm not a big believer in this card.
Yeah, I think it's just fine. You want to give it a C?
Yeah, I was going to go C-.
Okay, yeah, I'll stay with my C. And one thing, too, is that you're in higher-powered environments, you have to be pickier, more picky even, about what your expensive cards are. And this isn't that expensive. It's only 3 mana. But usually I rag on, like, make sure your 4s and your 5s are really, really good if you want to play that 4 or 5. I think even 3 mana creatures in this set, you're going to have to be like, is this item actually really good? Or at least above average? Because if not, it's probably going to be interchangeable with a lot of other stuff. All right, what's our next one? What's our modal double face card for blue-black?
Next, we have Waterlogged Teachings. This is 3 and a blue-black hybrid for an instant. Search your library for an instant or card with flash, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And the backside is a tapped blue-black duel, and all of these are going to be tapped duels on the backside.
Yeah, another cool thing about these Modern Horizon sets is they a lot of callbacks to old cards. This one is a callback to Mystical Teachings, which is a ancient card at this point. And I would say that this one is not one that we're like, oh man, like that spell is just really good. In fact, it's quite overcosted.
Yeah, this is one of the worst ones for sure, I think.
Yeah, you're really only going to be happy to cast this as your last card after you've drawn your land late. It's more like flood insurance rather than a 50-50. Okay, I might play this land. In game, I might play this early. I might save it. I think you're only going to really want to not play this as land if it's one of the later cards you draw.
Yeah, I still think like the worst rating I'm going to give a just a dual land is like a C plus. So
Exactly.
I'm still
Yeah.
just gonna give it that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I was saying a lot of not nice words. Well, it sounds like not nice words, but yeah, these can only go so low. So I'll give C plus for Warlog teachings as well. Okay, that's gonna bring us to red black, and red black is also like blue black, where it's not really doing something like Jeskai was in a shard. There's 3 colors that are doing it. Red black is its standalone thing, and it's artifacts affinity. So we've got Cranial Ram as a common here. This is red black for an equipment, and it's got Living Weapon, which says when this equipment enters the battlefield, you create a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ creature token, then attach it to this. The effect is the equipped creature gets plus X plus 1, where X is the number of artifacts you control, and the equip cost is 2. So if you haven't played with Living Weapon, you can sort of think of it like For Mirrodin, where it comes with attached to a creature, although not like For Mirrodin. You don't get to just go, okay, play my equipment, immediately put it on something that can attack without losing the creature, because it's a 0/0 creature.
Yeah, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this first, because I have some thoughts.
Ooh, okay. I think this card's pretty good. So it's call back to was it Cranial Plating, and that was like an all-time busted constructed card. And it's not going to be as busted here. The equip costs and the mana costs are different, but plus X plus 1, making anything you have into quite a large threat. There's some invasive creatures. There's menace. There's flying in these colors. I think this deck is fairly well supported. Like I think you're going to get a deck, or you can get a good deck with mostly all artifacts. I was going to start high on this card, but I don't know. You want to? I'd like to hear what you think.
I want to hear your grade before
my
I talk
grade.
to you.
You want to hear my locked in grade? Okay, I was going to give Cranial Ram a B minus.
B minus. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I, oftentimes I try to create some friction just to make discussion
Of
going,
course.
and of course you're allowed to change your grade.
The
after
viewers
hearing
love
what
it.
I have to say. But after looking through the set a bunch of times, I think that like weeks 1 and 2, the red-black decks are going to be bad.
Ooh, okay. That's not something I was thinking. So please.
I don't see. I mean, we're gonna have to get in. This is getting way ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, if that's even possible during a set review. But there's just not a lot of artifacts that I want to put in my deck, and I thought. Originally, I was going to say for the whole format, I thought red-black was going to be bad, but I think it's going to be to the point where you have to be the red-black drafter, and everyone else at the table know that it's like, one of the bottom, whatever, 2 or 3 color pairs.
Right.
For you to get the deck. I think you need like every piece to make a good deck. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Because you need critical density of artifacts, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, like for every card that you're short of your ideal deck, I think is going to hurt this deck a lot, because it's very much playing where a lot of the affinity stuff where you need artifacts in play, you want like every card you play to be an affinity card to match the explosive openings of some of the other decks that they can produce. And this thing on its own, if you don't have a lot of other artifacts, like this is a 1/1 for 2 that equips for 2 to give +1/+1. It sucks.
Yep. Yeah, I guess I didn't quite. I didn't feel the same way looking through like the artifacts and being like, I don't want to play that. But of course, as we get to them, maybe I'll change my mind. That's another thing as far as like meta commentary on the set reviews go. I get a lot of comments on the YouTube comments being like, 3 or 4% being like, Alex always changes his grades. So whatever Mark says, there's a reason. Mark makes compelling arguments, and I reserve the right to change my grade. So we'll see. I'm gonna stick there, but I might really regret this grade by the end of the set or the set review. I'll stick with my B minus. What do you want to give it?
Yeah, this one's tough because am I giving this a grade for my weeks 1 and 2 predictions, or my the format has balanced out predictions? I'm just gonna go. I'll just give this a C though.
Okay.
I think it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, we can come back to it after.
But if you do get like the perfect artifact deck, this is the card you want like 10 copies of, right? Like it's very good in that deck.
Right, and it gets really, really. The more copies you have, the better this gets, right? That's like I think a pretty clear thing to see. All right, next up we've got the uncommon here, Pyretic Rebirth. 2 black-red for an instant at uncommon. Return target artifact or creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Pyretic Rebirth deals damage equal to that card's mana value to up to 1 target creature or player. It's a nice clean 2-for-1, get something back, deal some damage. A little finicky. Thing has to be in the yard, and the thing you want to buy back has to be big enough to kill something, but it's got some upside.
Right, so already the uncommon is not an artifact.
Yeah, not supporting exactly that theme of critical density, right?
I do like this card though. It
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of Back for More
Mm-hmm.
from OTJ and whatever past set it was from, where I don't think you're going to cast this on turn 4 a lot, but in the late game this is going to be like the card where your opponent just like groans and pulls their hair out because you've got 1 or 2 copies of this thing.
Yeah, this almost doesn't even really look to me like a red black aggro affinity card. It's more a card I think
Right.
it's just going to be splashed in a lot of places.
Yes, 100% agree. Yeah.
Right. So I think if you're looking at it through that lens, I like the card a lot, and I would give it like a B.
Yep, I think I'll join you there.
All right, B for Pyrotic Rebirth, just a good 2-for-1. The land here is once again not supporting the artifact theme. It's Blood-Soaked Insight as the spell side. It's 5 Rakdos Hybrid for a sorcery, but it costs 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. And the effect is target opponent exiles the top 3 cards of their library until end of turn. Until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. If you cast a spell this way, mana of any type can be spent to cast it.
Yeah, so kind of a weird card because if you're damaging your opponent, then you want to push your advantage and kill them
Mm-hmm.
instead of like
Mm-hmm.
slow the game down and draw cards. So the discount on this is a little strange.
Yes.
And the other thing I find about these split cards is again I didn't play the set where you had a lot of the MDFCs. What I don't know, what was it? Was it BFC or some other
Yeah,
set
it
like
was
that?
Zendikar Rising.
Zendikar Rising, okay. But my inclination is that as tempting it is to see a super expensive card on the front side where it's like, oh, if I'm flooded, this card's gonna like just win me the game. My inclination is that you kind of want things that are medium costed
Mm-hmm.
because if you draw this, ignoring the discount, if you draw this when you have 4, 5, or 6 lands, which is usually kind of where you are in the mid game, it's really awkward because you have to either wait to hit more lands or decide to pay it as your 7th land. So you can't just like cast this bonus spell that you've unlocked.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, some awkwardness here. When I was going through all like this cycle of MDFC dual lands, I think this is the most, maybe the worst, but the most awkward for a lot of the reasons you kind of just said.
Well, I think this is similar to the blue black one. Like they're
Right.
both kind of
Yeah,
just
one of the
if you
most.
get to do it, it's great, but it's basically just a dual land.
Yeah. So you want to give
So
this
another C plus
another
then?
C plus? Yeah, I'll give another
Yeah.
C plus to Blood Soaked Insight. All right, what's our first red green card here?
Oh boy. We have Writhing Chrysalis, 2 red green for a 2/3 Eldrazi drone. This card is devoid, which means even though it has a red green casting cost, it is considered to have no color.
Mm-hmm.
When you cast this spell, so not when it comes into play, but when you cast it, create 2/0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawned creature tokens with the ability to sacrifice this creature to add colorless. It has reach, and it has whenever you sacrifice another Eldrazi, put a +1/+1 counter on Writhing Chrysalis.
Oh man, okay, so lots to talk about here. A lot of power. This is, I think you just have this as one of the better uncommons in a lot of sets, but it's just a common here. So let's break down the many parts of this card and the things I think you need to know. So red, green, and blue are the Eldrazi colors. You're gonna see red, green as more of like a stompy kind of kill your opponent deck with a little bit of ramp in there, a little bit of the spawns, caring about colorless creatures. Blue green is a little more on the going big, casting huge Eldrazi side of things. Devoid doesn't seem like much of a mechanic, but there are a lot of cards, or at least a handful of cards that say, how many colors spells do you have, or how many colorless creatures do you have. When you cast a colorless card, that matters. There are also, as I just mentioned, giant Eldrazi's you can cast, 5 plus 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana Eldrazi's here and there in the set. I think that's basically it for this card. Oh, I guess the spawn tokens as well. These like little things that care about, they make colorless mana, which is something you're going to see in a few minutes here, where there are actual cards that need colorless specifically, not just, it's not generic mana. But this card alone, let's just focus on this one. It's a 4-mana 2/3 that comes with 3 bodies, and those bodies can block, and maybe you have a sacrifice outlet to use them somewhere else. Makes mana, and once you sacrifice the things, they're a 4/5, or the Chrysalis becomes a 4/5, and that's if you don't have any other Eldrazi spawns in the battlefield.
Right. So week one, there are, believe it or not, there are 4 cards in this set at least that I saw that deal exactly 4 damage in red below rare.
Yeah.
3 commons and 1 uncommon all deal exactly 4 damage. So you're gonna see in week one where you cast this and you pass the turn, and then your opponent points a 4 damage burn spell at it at end of turn, and you just sack your 2 Eldrazi spawn and make it into a 4/5 and blow them out, and then they pack up their cards and go home and decide this is the worst set ever.
Yeah, I do worry a little bit about those feel bad complexity moments for sure. That this is the kind of stuff that they tend to avoid in standard legal sets. Ah, geez. Yeah, so the cool thing, so just 2 play patterns with this card. One, play it on turn 4. Next turn, you untap, play your land, play like a 7-drop maybe, or just 7 mana worth of spells. That's great. Now you have a big beater. But also, playing this on turn 5, it's not going to be that hard. Just be like, play on turn 5, play a 3-drop in the same turn. A lot of great stuff going on here. Really hard to give this lower than a B. I don't know. Do you want to go to B plus for this one?
I was thinking of going with a hot A minus.
The hot A minus,
eh?
eh?
So good. I think this card is so good.
Wow. You know, you're not usually wrong about your high grades, Mark. You're usually not wrong. And against my better judgment, I will just still stick with my B plus. But
okay, like this is just it's so much better than a 4/5 reach for 4 mana,
for sure,
and that's like already an excellent card.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so much better than that.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with my B plus, like I said, but I do think this card is great. All right, now we move on to the dual land for red green is Stump Stomp. So this is 1 and a Gruul hybrid, so red or green. It's a sorcery, and it says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. And of course, it's a red-green tapped dual land on the other side. So it's just a rabid bite that can hit planeswalkers.
Yeah, this is the type of card I'm talking about, where this is just a spell that you will want. Like, it's not that efficient for the set it's in, but you will just want to draw this a lot of time as the spell.
Yeah, this one's just good. You're gonna want.
Yeah, are you playing this in every green and every red deck?
I would be surprised if I don't. I guess I could see it in like a red-white deck where most of your stuff is really small and you're not getting more than like 2 damage often. But even in most red-white decks, I think you're gonna have bigger creatures than that. Like, if this was literally always 2 damage, I don't think I would put this in a red-white deck, or at least close to literally always. But I think most places, yes.
Yeah, that should tell people how good it is, right? Like, you don't the fact that it's a dual it's like it's worse than a tapped mountain in it is a tapped mountain in red white, worse than a basic mountain, but you still would want to play this. Like, this card is excellent.
Yeah, this card is great. B plus for Stump Stomp?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great. Let's do that. All right, and then our green-red uncommon here is Titan's Vanguard. 3 green-red for a Eldrazi, of course. It's a 5/5 with Devoid, so it's colorless, basically. It's got Trample, and it says, when you cast this spell, and whenever Titan's Vanguard attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control.
So that is a cast trigger, so even if you counter it, you're still getting that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, it attacks and you get it again. And like, curving the common into this, you're adding at least 3 +1/+1 counters to your board.
That's so much power and toughness. Jeez.
This card is terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying. And just a call forward to a lot of the cards we're going to look at. It's when you cast this spell is something you're going to see on a lot of the Eldrazi. They get their effects on cast, so counter magic not as effective.
Yeah, and you're also like the fact that it's adding counters is also going to be relevant to a lot. Like, there's going to be cards that trigger when you're adding counters to them. It enables attacks. There's a lot of keywords out there. There's a lot of Eldrazi spawn that allow you to go pretty wide.
This thing's scary.
This thing's very good.
I'm going to give Titan's Vanguard a B+.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
Yeah, it's just massive. Has a good into the battlefield trigger, and you have to kill it. Yeah, it's great. All right, that's gonna bring us on to green white here. What's our first green white card?
Faithful Watchdog, green white for a 0/0 dog. It has vigilance, but it enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it.
Okay, it's a little watchdog action, and it's got vigilance to boot after what 20 years or whatever. This is
Watch Wolf, right?
sorry,
It was
watch
a wolf before.
watch wolf. Sorry, yeah, watch wolf. So this is a part of the Obzon Wedge. Green white is part of the Obzon Wedge, which cares about modified creatures. And if you don't remember or haven't seen what modified creatures are, it's a creature with a counter on it, an aura on it, it's enchanted, or it's equipped. And there's going to be 3 mechanics that we're going to see pretty often. That one for each of those things. We'll get to when we get to it. But this is a 2 mana creature that's really efficient. It's a 3/3, and it comes already modified for things that care about that.
Yeah, I also think this card's just great.
Yep, me too. Also, there's a little bit of proliferate in the set too, so just having something that a 2-drop that's good to proliferate onto. Vigilance is big. Yeah, really nice one here.
Is this a B?
Yeah, I was gonna go B- on the Watchdog, but I could see the synergies just on a lot of cards pushing this over the top to being a B.
Okay, yeah, I'll stick with my B.
Okay, cool. The uncommon here, Golden Tail Trainer, is 1 green white for a 1/3, and it says aura and equipment spells you cast cost X less to cast, where X is Golden Tail Trainer's power. And that's a line of text that is going to be quite relevant in this set. Some sets are like, might come up here and there, but as you'll see, that's relevant. When it attacks, other modified creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Golden Tail Trainer's power. So this one needs a little bit more work, has very high ceiling, and enables your stuff, but it starts small, needs some other pieces for it to be good.
I think a little more work is really underselling how much more work
Right,
this thing
yeah, for sure.
This thing needs a lot more work. Like, there's potential power in here, but this is... First of all, it doesn't do anything on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a 1/3 for 3. And then boosting your other creatures by 1 is not enough to make it worth a card. So you need to make sure you can get in with this. And you're it doesn't have any protection or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's the discount's nice, but I'm skeptical on this one.
No, me too, for sure. This might be one of the lower grades that we've given so far. Yeah, it like you said, like we both kind of said, there's a dream here and there's high upside, but it does need quite a lot, especially in like a higher powered set where 3 mana 1/3 is even more painful than it might usually be. Yeah, I want to start this.
I think I want to give this a either build around or synergy grade.
Right. Yeah, it's only, and it's one of those things I think people are going to put in their deck a little too often. We're like, oh, I'm the deck for it. It's not like you're just the deck for it. It's you're a very good version of that deck where almost all your other creatures and cards are going to support this. So if you are there, what would you give it?
I'm going to give it a build around C.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to go a little bit higher because I think, you have those sick curve outs of the dog into this, into like maybe you double spell the next turn. But yeah, no, I think C sounds about right, actually, now that I think about it. No, okay. I'll join you there. C for Golden Tail Trainer. Synergy C or build around C. However you want to think about it. All right.
Yeah, which is basically saying don't even play it if you're not in the deck, and if you are in the deck, it's good but not amazing.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah.
All right, and then our MDFC here is Strength of the Harvest. So this is 2 and a Selesnya hybrid. It's in an aura, and it says the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each creature and or enchantment you control. Green-white dual on the back.
Yeah, so this is a way to modify things, and this is potentially a ton of stats out of nowhere, right? Like, it's at a minimum, it's going to give +2/+2 for itself, plus the creature that it's on, and potentially a lot more than that. So good card, but not one you're going to play if you're not this is a green-white card specifically.
You think so? I think.
I think. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
The decks where you want this effect, aside from green white, are gonna be hurt more by the fact that it's a come into play tapped land.
Yeah, like red white deck. I could see green black not being too sad about it. Like it's still like it is also a modified deck, cares about counters, maybe a little bit slower, a little bit bigger. Put on a
Yeah,
life
yeah,
linker.
maybe you might be right about
Yeah.
that. It's certainly a nice effect to have on a free card.
Oh, it's also pretty good with the Eldrazi spawns too, right? Like you're going in like green red or something. I agree with
Yeah,
what you just said. It's very good. It's a good effect to have on a land.
yeah, yeah. I mean, these MDFCs that we talked about how hard they're going to be to grade because they're just like the lands
Yeah.
a pretty good floor to have for any card. So I do think it's interesting to think about, well, which non-green white pairs this goes into, and maybe it is just good enough that it's going to make it in. Although I don't think I'd spend much of a pick on it at that point.
Right. No, I agree with that. I'm gonna give it a B minus. You agree?
Okay, that sounds right.
Okay.
I'll join you there.
Yeah, definitely better than I think some of the lesser ones we've seen.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, what's our first black-white card?
We have Obstinate Gargoyle, 1 white-black for a 2/2 artifact creature. It has flying as long as it's modified, and modifications are basically equipments, auras you control, and counters on it. So something that changes its, what it is. And then it has Persist, which means when this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its control with a -1/-1 counter on it. And notably, I'm sure Alex was going to mention this anyways, but -1/-1 counters and +1/+1 counters cancel each other out.
Mm-hmm.
So you can reset the Persist by adding a +1/+1 counter on it. Although if you do add exactly one, it will become unmodified.
Right. Yeah, kind of weird there. So black-white's got this theme of caring about your modified creatures dying, which is a little weird because generally when you're suiting up your creatures with counters or auras or equipment, you want them to survive over multiple turns. So it's one of the themes I'm slightly skeptical about. As far as this card goes, it's a pretty okay blocker. Like it blocks twice if that's what you're interested in. Your opponents don't want to attack their 2 toughness creatures into this thing. If you put that, for example, that aura we just looked at that gives your creature +1/+1 for each thing you have, each creature in enchantment, becomes pretty big as a flying creature. I think this is one that you're going to want more of a reason to play than not. Like, you care about 2 sacrifices, or you have just, like, a billion things that are good to suit this up with. Like, we're going to see in a second a lifelink aura, and that's pretty good on this. But I don't think this one's as generically good as some of the other commons we've seen.
Right. Well, so at its baseline, it's a 2/2 with kind of like with Afterlife 1, right?
Mhm.
It dies into like a 1/1 flyer, which is not MH3 power level card. So you
No.
really need to be doing something to reset it to really get that value. But notably, there's also a few cards in this set that proliferate. So if you're casting this and it persists and dies and comes back, and your opponent proliferates, they can just kill it.
Yeah. Ooh. Don't like that very much.
No.
So I have one more thing actually I want to say about modifications in a second, but let's put a grade on this before we do that. I'm gonna give Obstinate Gargoyle a D+.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I think this is one that you're going to find spots for it, but it's not as much of a reward as the other commons. And yeah, just the one thing I wanted to note, just kind of rules-wise, Modified cares about counters, not just +1/+1 counters. So flying counters, -1 counters, obviously on this card, but ability counters are scattered throughout the set. And as far as auras go, it's only auras you control, like it says in the reminder text here. But if your opponent casts a negative granting aura, your creature won't be modified. So just thought I'd mention that. Okay, next up we've got Undo Not Master as the black-white uncommon here. It's 1 black-white for a 2/2 lifelink, and it says whenever another modified creature you control dies, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Undo Not Master. But we've got an adventure here. So the adventure side is Throw a Line. It's black-white for a sorcery. Distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures.
I just have this visual of someone being at the bottom of a cliff and this guy throwing down his line. It's just like a mess of tangled you can't get it untangled. You gotta spend all the time.
Yeah, and then you for some reason He's incentivized to do that because if his friend dies, he gets bigger. Apparently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a hole somewhere that you have to unravel if you want
Yeah.
to find it.
Yeah, I don't think I want to sign up for this climbing service this guy's offering. So
Mm.
it's kind of in the fashion of classic adventures where the creature's a little bit understated, but you're getting obviously some modality and some added some added value. I don't know if I love this one either though.
Okay, I kind of like this thing. So
Okay.
what grade do you want to give it before I guess we present both sides of the argument?
Yeah, like when I say I don't love it, I was still gonna give it like a C plus. But what if you want to talk me up, I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, I just like there's a few one drops in the set,
Mm-hmm.
and having a free card that puts two counters on a one drop is already like pretty good. Modifying two things like that two counters for free on something, put two counters on something, draw a card, which is kind of what this is. Seems like adventure cards have always just played out really well,
Yeah, totally.
in my opinion. And I think the adventure ability side there is just like exactly what you probably want in black white. And then the body is a little small, but it's two counters per death. So
Mm-hmm.
like the first time a creature dies, you have a 4/4 lifelink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, four overlifting's big. Don't
And
wanna.
like if you've grown two things and are attacking with them, and then you play this on turn 4, is your opponent just like not gonna block your big things that are beating in, or like because they don't want to trade and trigger this thing?
Yeah, I agree. I just think that a lot of time what's gonna happen is like you've spent 4 mana, they kill this with a 1 mana spell, then you make the blocks that they thought were pretty good, or they attack with attacks that they thought were pretty good. Your blocks are a lot better. I think that's what you just described is definitely upside on the card. So maybe I'm a little bit higher on it than I was a second ago, but I still think I'm gonna be fairly compared to the other cards we looked at is what I'm thinking here. I think this one's still not that great.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna. I mean, you gave it C plus, which is a pretty generous
Yeah.
grade. I think I was just gonna go B minus.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. We're on to the next card here. Glasswing Grace. This is the MDFC for black white, and it's an aura, and it says the enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has flying and lifelink. Pretty good. Black white dual on the back.
Did you say the cost? I don't think you did.
Oh, sorry, I didn't. It's 3 Orzhov hybrid, so 5 mana.
Yeah, so 5 mana for 2/2 flying lifelink. Yeah, +2/+2 flying lifelink.
It's a good buff. It's an expensive buff, but it's a good buff.
Right, it's just gonna end the game sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, like
Yeah.
on the turn you cast it, and if not, your opponent needs an answer to this thing.
Yeah, like even though the green white one is less expensive and grows more, like flying and lifelink is more the type of thing I want on one of these, where if you've got a bunch of lands and you're just trying to end the game, this will do it a lot more effectively, I think.
So the question, as we've been asking ourselves, are we just gonna put this in most decks that have one of these colors?
Yeah, I think so. But again, I'm not going to take it over cards that will improve my main deck, right? Like improving your mana base is a really nice bonus you get to have sometimes, but in this case, I wouldn't prioritize it over improving my 23 main deck cards.
Yep, agree with that. B minus for Glasswing Grace.
Yep, sure.
Great. Next up, we're going to black green. So black green, another of the modified color pairs. This one has the adapt mechanic. So green, you're going to see this on a lot of cards, so I'm just going to read it out here first. So adapt says, if this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, put a +1/+1 counter on it. There's a cost associated with it. It's, for example, here on Expanding Ooze, I'll just read out the full card here so you get some context. 1 black green for a 3/3. Adapt cost is black green for adapt 1. So it's modular. It could be adapt 2, 3, 4, whatever number of counters. When Expanding Ooze attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target modified creature you control.
Yeah, so notably, adapting does have a little bit of awkwardness because sometimes you want to curve this into like maybe you have a 4-drop that adds a counter to it.
Right.
You can no longer adapt at that point because it already has a counter on it. So you do kind of need to be cognizant of your sequencing, like whether you're going to give up on that adaptability or not. But I am really looking forward to some of the starts out of these black green decks because I think there's some pretty cool lines you can get into, and this is a big key of a lot of those, and it being a common is exactly what I wanted to see for this archetype.
Yeah, this thing swings as a 5/5 on turn 4. Worth noting if you want
Hmm.
to invest the 2 mana and then play another 2-drop. Yeah, card's pretty strong. Yeah, you can put it on any modified creature. Yeah, I like it. Cheap adapt cost. I'm gonna give Expanding Ooze a B minus.
Yeah, that's where I am as well.
Sweet. Yeah, pretty strong one. We've got the Modal Double Face card here, Revitalizing Repast. This is an instant, and it says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains indestructible until end turn. I don't think I read the mana cost out again. It's a single mana Golgari hybrid, so either a black or a green.
Yeah, this is one. This may be the best one.
It's really, really efficient. Like, this is, it's not quite Snakeskin Veil because it doesn't protect against bounce, exile, whatever, but close to Snakeskin Veil, but also works in combat. There's a trade-off there, right? Huh.
But also, like, Snakeskin Veil didn't care about +1/+1 counters.
Right. Yep. No synergies. Yeah. This one's really, really strong.
Yeah, this thing's so good.
Yeah. And I think you are mostly gonna play this in any deck that has one of the colors.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this like a B plus?
Yeah. I'm gonna give B plus to Revitalize and Repast. I think time and time again that these cheap protection spells have proven to be really good, and adding land to the backside plus energy. Yeah. I think it deserves the B plus. All right. So what's our uncommon here for black green?
We have Cursed Wombat, black green for a 2/3 Nightmare Wombat. It has Adapt 2 for 2 black green, so basically 4 mana for 2 counters. And I don't think we mentioned this on the previous card, but Adapt is notably instant speed ability, so you can go into combat and do it, or on their turn or end of turn. A lot of these black green cards you want to, like the last one, you want to do it before you attack anyway, so it didn't really matter. But the other ability on this card, permanents you control have. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on this permanent, put up additional +1/+1 counter on it. This ability only triggers once each turn. Notably, that part is still in the quotation marks. So each permanent has the only triggers once each turn. It's not like you only get it once total. You get it once for each permanent you have.
Right. Yeah, so it's a slightly different but mostly better Winding Constrictor for those who played with that card. And yeah, this, you're talking about nasty starts from black green. Was this a card potentially per chance were you thinking of when you thought about those starts?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm all about this thing. This thing's great.
Yeah, this card's really, really strong. It's basically Adapt 3, right? It becomes a 5/6 on turn 4 if you want it to be.
Yep.
Massive. Yeah, this card's fantastic. B plus. Super cheap.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, this thing's really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna give B plus to Cursed Wombat. It's gonna bring us to the blue-green cards here. So back to Eldrazi stuff. Like I mentioned before, blue-green is blue-green ramp Eldrazi, and Snapping Void Craw is the common here. 1 blue-green for a 1/3 Eldrazi turtle. It's got Devoid, so it's colorless. It taps to add colorless, and it has an ability 3 and colorless mana. So I think this is our first instance of colorless as a actual cost you need to pay. Tap it to draw a card. So 4 mana, tap, draw a card.
Yeah, so it's like kind of like there's 6 colors in this set, where colorless is almost like something you're going to be splashing to a certain degree in various decks, because you can't add wastes from the basic land pool to your deck. Like you can't have an unlimited number of colorless sources, so you will need to work for them. So the fact that this adds colorless is potentially even going to be an upside in some spots, and there's some pretty big things to ramp to too. So this is better than it might look like if you've played previous sets where an understated mana ramper isn't necessarily the best.
Yeah, and even if you don't have some giant thing in hand, just being able to, when you untap with this, you're going to be able to double spell extremely well. It's a mana dork that is a good top deck in the late game because it just starts drawing you cards. I think this is it definitely is a little bit undersized, but I think the upsides are there. And I hate undersized mana dorks, but this is one that I'm willing to accept because it can be really explosive and got good late game value.
Yeah, like if your opponent plays this on turn 3, it's just like some of the other signposts on commons. It's basically like a must kill.
Yes. I think you're very incentivized to kill this thing when the opponent plays it.
And then late game, like it just it's gonna run away with the game too because of its draw card abilities.
They even play well in multiples too. Sometimes mana dorks don't play that well in multiples, but this one does, right? You can just
Yeah.
tap one to tap the other one's draw ability. Yeah, I like it a lot. Want to give a B minus to Snapping Void Craw?
I wasn't gonna go that high.
Okay.
I was thinking this would be. I was gonna go C, but I'm wondering
Ooh.
if I'm too low on it.
Yeah, I think one of the things about this set in general is everything kind of has potential to be pretty good. Like none of the cards are very few of the cards are underpowered. I think it's going to come out in the wash as what ends up being the better decks, right? So I'm going to generally treat things as these things are supported and they're good. I could see the blue-green Eldrazi ramp like not being as good as just some of the other stuff though.
Well, you know what? In that case, I will give it a C plus because I kind of like how blue green's
Nice.
shaping up.
Good.
So you unintentionally convinced me to almost.
No. It was all planned. All right, next up we've got the blue-green uncommon, Planner Genesis. It's an instant, and it says look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't, put a card from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, sort of, it's like a growth spiral. Impulse had a baby, and they came up with Planner Genesis.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And solid card, nothing special.
Yeah. I think it plays well with the blue-green theme. It's a ramp spell that you're happy to draw in the late game. Yeah, it's a good Magic the Gathering card.
Make it a B minus.
Ooh, that's a little bit higher. I was just gonna give it a C plus, but
Okay.
yeah.
I was thinking C plus. So you were talking it up. I'll stick with C plus.
Okay. Yeah, nice. All right, and what's our modal double face card for blue green?
We have Drowner of Truth. 5 blue-green hybrid, so 7 mana total. For a 7/6 Eldrazi, it is devoid, meaning it has no color. We don't have to mention this every time, but first couple at least. And when you cast this spell, if colorless mana was spent to cast it, create 2/0/1 spawn tokens with sacrifice this creature out of mana. Backside, of course, is the blue-green duel.
Yeah, so we've got that awkwardness again of expensive thing on one side, land on the other side, but I think you're going to care about that a little bit less in the Eldrazi deck. You're going to have a lot more mana sources available to you. It's nice that one of your lands just, one of the problems with ramp decks in general is just drawing the wrong half of your deck, drawing your mana production things or your ramp creatures, or your payoff creatures, and it's not the most exciting payoff, but it's a big thing. It's an impactful thing.
Yeah, notably, the fact that this costs 7 is sometimes an upside for
Mhm.
blue-green, because there's a few things that trigger off of casting 7 CMC creatures,
Yep.
and you don't want to throw 6, 7, 8 things that cost a ton of mana in your deck. So I do think that this card is kind of a nice way to stock up those numbers, and I also think it's more likely that this does not replace a land in these decks.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, I like that. It's almost like you want an 18th land in your ramp decks a lot of the time, and this can kind of just be that 18th land, and you don't feel bad about adding more mana sources that, it's a mana source that won't make you flood more.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit more narrow, because this one definitely isn't one you're just going to throw into any deck. I think it's still pretty good, though. B minus?
I wrote down B minus for myself already, so I will join you there.
Cool. And chat points something out that is good to note. There is actually kind of like another blue-green uncommon hidden in the colorless cards, so just make note of that. Blue-green kind of gets one more payoff. All right.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get to that one later.
Moving on to blue-red now. So blue-red, once again, back to energy, and where blue-white was kind of flying tempo-y energy, helps, a lot of things that help you in combat. Blue-red's being described as like mid-range energy. I think it's the way I've kind of laid it out is it's if you've played Kaladesh and you remember assembling all these like Rube Goldberg machines, like you've got all these engines, these things that make energy, and you've got these payoffs, these finicky things. I think blue red's kind of like that. It can probably play a bit more aggressive too. The common here that we're gonna get to in a second might play into that, but I think when you think of blue red, you're really thinking like assembling all the parts of your contraption and going to town. So the common here is Cyclops Superconductor. 1 blue-red for a 2/2. That common. It's got prowess, and it says when it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy. And when the superconductor dies, you can pay 3 energy. And when you do, the Cyclops deals damage equal to its power to any target. Ooh.
Yeah, I'll start with this one, but I think my gut says I'm gonna like this less than the general community.
Okay, okay. Let's hear it.
Like death triggers are always kind of meh, right? And like your opponent knows it's gonna be coming.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna know usually how much damage it is because you're not gonna often have a ton of open mana in combat, and if you are, your opponent's probably not gonna tussle with you. And then it doesn't net you any energy. Like if the blue white cards both gave you 3 energy but only cost 2 to use their ability,
Mm-hmm.
this one's not leaving anything behind. And I just don't think it's like that efficient.
So, I think it's not a very good aggressive card, but I think it's a really good defensive card. No,
Ye-
like it's a really good thing to play on 3. Your opponent stops some of your opponent's attacks sometimes. Like sometimes they literally cannot attack into it because they just 2 things die.
Yeah, it still gives you 3 energy up front and has a threat,
Yeah.
but I kind of look at this similar to, well, like we had the blue white uncommon, the 1/4
Mm-hmm.
that gave you exalted
Yep.
counters, and I think this is like very similar, I guess. Like it's fine.
It's
It's
fine.
makes energy, it's good, but it's nothing special.
Okay, what grade are you gonna give it? Because I imagine this might be a situation where the grade ends up being we're similar-ish.
I was gonna give it a C plus.
Okay, that's exactly what I was gonna give it
Okay.
to.
I,
Yeah.
I just thought people were higher on this.
Yes.
Like,
No, I know where you're coming from. I've definitely seen some people be very high on it. Just I think the dream of like doming them for 5 or whatever, dealing 5, then doming them for 5 somehow is there. So people tend to be dreamers in these kind of cards.
yeah, and there are a lot of ways to like pump creatures' power, but not a ton of them are in blue red, right? So now you're kind
Mm-hmm.
of talking about 3 colors, but there is a potential to just deal like a ton of damage to something.
Yeah, stay tuned for the Cyclops Superconductor combo deck that will be discovered, I'm sure, on week 2 or whatever. We've got Is It Genitorium is the uncommon here. So this is blue-red for an artifact. It says if you would get 1 or more energy, you get that many plus 1 instead. And you can tap it to draw a card, but activate only if you've paid or lost 4 or more energy this turn.
Yeah, so this is probably deserving of another synergy grade.
Yep.
But if you are like to the point where your deck is 3/4 or more cards that either care about energy or want it, this card's gonna be excellent.
It's got to be dense. Yeah, your deck has to be energy dense to really want it. But and worth noting, there are some payoffs that you don't just get to be like, oh, I'm spending it here. Like we just looked at the last card, right? The superconductor. You can't just be like, well, I'm spending the energy here. Worth noting, like it's not a lot of them, but when you're counting how many energy cards you have, it's not always going to be like, well, I've got 12 of them, but if 5 of them you don't get to just spend willy-nilly, then this card gets worse too.
Yeah, the other thing is that there's not much that asks you to spend exactly 4 energy.
Yeah, good
So a
point.
lot of times you're gonna need to have like 2 things cost you energy in order to trigger the draw card.
I'm kind of like when I was talking about how you've got these like Kaladesh style Rube Goldberg machines, like this is the card I was talking about, where I'm trying to think of a great comparison from Kaladesh, and it probably doesn't matter because it won't resonate with enough people anyways. But this, long story short, it's what we said at the beginning. Like this is the all-in energy stuff. You're not you really should be careful about this card if you're just like an energy deck that has some energy cards, and be careful. I mean, just don't play it.
Yeah, I think so. The awkward thing about this too is you want to cast it on turn 2 so that it's before all of your other energy producers,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't really help you catch up for that lost tempo, and it's not actually going to really do anything for a couple more turns.
Right. The more I think about it, the more I actually think there's like even in your super heavy energy decks, you're not gonna really want it. I guess you're probably once the set develops and people understand how, finicky this card is. I imagine it's gonna be a card people take early to try out, but you're going to get it close to last pick a lot of the time, so that's the value in it. But
So like a synergy C minus.
yeah, you synergy C minus, and that grid is encompassing just how heavy energy I think you have to be to want it. Because even still, the payoff's it's good but not amazing. So yeah, I'll join it there. All right, and then our blue-red double face card is Rush of Inspiration. This is one. Is it? It's an instant, and it says draw 2 cards, then discard a card at random. Interesting. Unless you pay 2 energy. Blue-red tap land at the back.
Yeah, so as a lot of times you'll have choice as to what your energy is worth, and in this case, 2 energy is worth the card, which is a pretty good deal.
Yeah, card like exactly the kind of split card you like when you have a land. It's a card draw spell when you got a lot of lands, and a land when you don't have a lot of lands.
Yep, card's really good.
Just good, yeah.
So would you play this in a non-energy, like a green-red deck or whatever?
No, I don't think so, because just catalog, worse than catalog, discard a card at random is pretty bad. So this one's kind of tricky because you've been really grading them on like, would you just play this anywhere, or would you play this only in the deck it belongs in? I guess the output's the same, but I was just thinking like, you actually need the energy for this to be good. You can't even really consider playing it somewhere else.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. So is this one like it's still decent, like a B minus?
Yeah. I'll give Rush of Inspiration a B minus.
Okay.
All right, and that's gonna bring us on to red-white. So the last of the energy color pairs here. Red-white, of course, is more aggressively focused, and we've got Conduit Goblin as the common here. Red-white for a 2/2. When it ETBs, you get 2 energy, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay a single energy, and if you do, another target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Nice.
Yeah, this is a nice little 2-drop. Like, anytime a gold pair has 2-drops, I guess this is something we didn't really mention, but the more expensive the card, the more splashable they are. But when you have a red-white 2-drop, like, those only go to the red-white player. So being the only red-white player at your table, you probably get every single one of these that are opened up.
Right. And basically this says, like, if you've got multiples, it kind of just says all your creatures have haste for the rest of the game.
Yeah, because this is already giving your potentially next 2 creatures +1/+0 and haste, or you can either play it and boost something that you've already played for an extra damage. Like, yeah, this card's really good.
Yeah, I like it a lot. This is a just like the blue-white deck. This is a really, really strong 2-drop for those decks. As you can see, like the white cards are a little bit the white energy cards are spending energy more just to like beat down, where I think the blue and sort of the red cards are using them more to be engine-y. And yeah, I'm gonna give Conduit Goblin kind of a similar grade as we did of the blue-white one. I'm gonna give it a B minus.
Yeah, I'm B minus as well.
Great. All right, the MDFC, the split card, is Legion Leadership, 1 and a Boros hybrid. It's an instant, and it says until end of turn, double target creature's power. It gains first strike. And a little bit weird. It's almost like double strike, but I guess has a few more synergies because if, for example, that Cyclops superconductor, you make its power really big. A few things here and there to care about a creature's power. But it's effectively.
Yeah, I like it was you who tweeted about this when you're short a few words on your essay at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just double strike, just target creature, double its power, and then first strike. Yeah, exactly. This is good though. It's a solid spell. Not gonna play it everywhere, but
yeah, this one's more of a red-white dual land.
Yeah, and a pretty good one.
So C plus.
Yep, C plus for Legion Leadership.
Okay.
All right, and then we got a nice uncommon here. What do we have for the red-white uncommon?
Fury of Gremlins, 2 red-white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red gremlin creature tokens. Then you get an amount of energy equal to the number of creatures you control. Pay 4 energy, and creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn.
Yeah, okay, so this is sort of a callback to Heroic Reinforcements, which was like a 4 mana, make 2 tokens, your creatures all get +1/+1 and haste until end of turn. It's a little bit different, of course, but this being like repeatable, pumping your team if you've got enough energy. 4, this is a way to spend mana, or spend energy in an increment of 4, which
Yeah, if you're
is
playing
something.
the full Jeskai.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, card's fairly strong.
You do want to be pretty wide for this because if you
Yes.
don't get that that activation, like it's a lot worse if you only have one creature in play when you cast this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. It's worse as a standalone top deck or whatever when nothing else is on the board.
Yeah, like if you have nothing or one other creature, this card's pretty unimpressive. You need to have multiple creatures for this to be good.
Yeah. No, you know what? I'm slightly lower than I thought I'd be on it. I'm like reading it for a third time. Uh, Still good. I think the fact that it's just repeatable, pump your whole team, giving haste matters sometimes too. I think that's something not to overlook. But
Okay, I'm going to talk you down on that part too.
yeah, sure.
So you let's assume that you have, three other creatures and this gives you 5 energy, right? And then you spend the 4 on it.
Right.
The next 3 energy that you get, there's probably a better way to spend it than using this again. Like there could be. It's not necessarily. What I'm trying to say is, even if you have the ability to use it again, it could be that by that point there's something else that's better spent using that energy. Because 4 energy is a lot.
I also, one other small thing that I dislike is that a lot of the energy triggers that we have seen and are going to see in white are attack triggers or at the beginning of combat, and so you can't even like threat of activation this thing. A lot of times, like your opponents are gonna know that you have the 4 energy or not.
Right.
Okay, no, totally. You talked me down. Still okay though. Like talk down. I was gonna be pretty high on it, but talk me down to like C plus B minus territory.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a C plus. Like I
Yeah.
think it's still good in all red white decks. You're not gonna cut it,
Mm-hmm.
but there's gonna be times when it's gonna be worse than that for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
It's a very big delta between the best case and worst case for this thing.
No, I will join you at that C plus. C plus for Scurry
Okay.
of Gremlins. All right, now we move on to finally out of the gold card range, and like we mentioned before, it's gonna pick up the pace at this point because that's like all the mechanics or most of the mechanics, the main ones, and getting all the housekeeping stuff out of the way. We never went to colorless, and usually there's not too much in colorless, but all the Eldrazi are colorless. So we're gonna start here with Drown Yard Lurker, 7 mana Eldrazi at common. It's a 7/7 vigilance. And whenever you cast or cycle Drown Yard Lurker, you make a spawn token, a 1 spawn token, and cycling for 2 and a blue.
Yeah, so notably this and the next one are basically taking up like this is taking a blue common slot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one less blue common because this card exists basically.
So it's like the payoff you get for your ramp deck that nobody else is going to want if you don't pick up the better ones. And it's fairly unimpressive. It's big.
I mean, it costs 7, which can be a benefit sometimes, and it has a buyout where
Mm-hmm.
there are ways to, reanimate things in this set. So you won't get the cast trigger if you do that, but still getting a 7/7 vigilance is pretty big.
You cycle this, return to your hand with the black red uncommon that deals damage. I guess that's like a weird
Yeah,
cross synergy.
but yeah, this is pretty filler level. Like,
Yeah.
what is this, like a D plus type
Yeah,
of
I
thing?
think a D plus for Drown Yard Lurker. I would expect if you're drafting the ramp deck, like you're getting into it for better reasons, and you want you want to have a density of payoffs, but we've seen on a lot of the cards already that there's the uncommon ramper that draws a bunch of cards. There's the MDFC that's just like a land on the backside. I think you can just do better. So yeah, D plus for Lurker, only for the deck that wants it. All right, what's next? Kind of its twin.
Yeah, which is probably going to be a similar type of grade. Warped Tusker, 7 mana, 6/8 for an Eldrazi Boar Beast with Reach. And same text, when you cast or cycle this, create a 0/1 spawn token, cycles for 2 and a green.
Yeah, so very almost the exact same card, just a power and toughness swapped and a keyword swapped and the color swapped. And yeah, I'll just give it a D plus as well. Also, whenever you have cycling on a large creature, I always think reanimation, and there's a little bit of reanimation in the set, but nothing that's really gonna like super mega combo with it. So D plus for Warp Tusker as well. All right, Null Elemental Blast is a colorless mana. It's an instant at uncommon, and it says choose one: counter target multicolored spell or destroy target multicolored permanent.
This seems like very much a sideboard card. Like there are gold commons in the set.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are devoid though. Like the blue green might not ever have any targets for this, even if they got a ton of multicolored spells.
Yeah.
So sideboard grade.
Yeah. Sideboard for an elemental blast, and you probably even won't side it in that much. They have to have quite a few multicolor permanents. All right, Vexing Bauble up next. Probably a quick one. Single mana for an artifact that are uncommon. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. You can pay 1 and sack the Bauble to draw a card. Constructed card.
Yeah, so I would give this an F, except I do think that if you're drafting, the black red all in affinity deck,
sure.
like anything that's
Totally.
providing an artifact for cheap is going to be playable. So I will instead give this probably a D plus because I think it will go in that specific deck only.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Even still in like the black red decks, there's not that much like actual affinity stuff. But yeah, no, it's a good distinction between F and D plus. So I like that. I'll join you.
I'll just give it a D.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, what's up next?
Next we have It That Heralds the End. This is 1 and a colorless for a 2/2 uncommon Eldrazi drone. Colorless spells you cast with mana value 7 or greater cost 1 less to cast, and other colorless creatures you control get +1/+1.
Yeah, so we should probably just give a little bit of a call out here for like how you're actually casting these colorless spells, especially these cheap ones that don't, you're not going to be able to play like an Eldrazi Spawn and then cast it. There is a cycle of 10 lands we're going to get to in a few minutes that are sort of like evolving wild variants that go and fetch one of 3 colors. There's 10 of them, one for each of the shards/wedges, and they also make colorless mana. They tap for colorless mana. So you're gonna need a lot of that kind of stuff in your deck, and just to support a 2-drop that needs colorless mana. Mind you, it's not the worst to play a little bit later on turn 4 or something, but as far as consistency goes, you want to have the option to do it some amount of the time. So let's just say you've got enough colorless sources in your deck, and enough is something between 7, 8, 9, which is kind of hard to do. Almost impossible, not impossible, but I almost think you're not going to play this on turn 2 almost ever. Sorry, almost ever is rough, but consistently almost ever.
I agree with the sentiment, but disagree with the conclusion.
Okay.
So there are, as you said, 10 of those common duels.
Mm-hmm.
There's about, I think, 2.2 to 2.3 of each common opened per draft in this set.
Yep.
So call it, 23 copies of these lands opened means that even if it's an even distribution, people are going to get 3 of those per player.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are prioritizing them, you could potentially end up with like 5 or 6 of them, I think, pretty easily without even counting all your other sources of colorless mana. So I do think colorless mana is going to be easier to come across than people expect.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, in a normal deck with 2 or 3 sources, 100% agree, just don't treat this as a 2-drop. Still, on turn 5, though, you play this on turn 5, and then on turn 6, you play your 7-drop. And this is an anthem for all of your creatures at that point. It still could be pretty good in the late game.
Yeah, it's still a good card. Definitely agree with that. And yeah, I think it's a good distinction to make. It's a 2 that you don't have to play on 2. Like as long as you have enough other 2s where you're not just not doing anything. What do I want to give this one?
I like this thing. Like, there's a lot of Eldrazi spawn out there that's making this go wide. Like, there's a lot of colorless creatures.
Yeah, I do agree.
I want to give this again, like, you're assuming you're in the Eldrazi deck. I want to give it like C+.
Yeah, that's a pretty good grade. I just really hope that my words of caution will caution people to not just jam this in your deck. Like, I think one of the things that I've noticed just players have a tough time with is just understanding how many sources they need to cast their spells consistently. I think people generally just underrate that for all sets in most contexts. So you got to have that 6, 7, 8 number before you're anywhere close to happy with it. So just be careful. All right, we got this Simic-ish uncommon up next that I called out a second ago. Wayscape Battle Mage, 1 and a colorless mana for a 2/2 at uncommon. It's an Eldrazi. It's got kicker for green and or 1 and a blue. If you spent green to kick it, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. And if you spent 1 and a blue to kick it, you bounce a creature the opponent controls.
So this card is basically like a 3-color card, right? Because you need
Right.
green, blue, and colorless mana. That being said, I think the fixing in this set is very good.
Mm-hmm. Good enough to do it.
Yeah, and I think this card is very very strong.
Yes, me too. There is a good number of artifacts and enchantments in the set.
Yes.
You're gonna find a target quite often. So if you do get the full package here, it's 5 mana, kill a enchantment or artifact, bounce something, and that's fantastic.
Yes.
Even just the buyout of like Reclamation Sage slash bad mana war. And I say buyout as in that's the bad. That's still good.
And as long as you have enough colorless sources, I think you're happy playing this in a green deck or a blue deck
Yep.
also. Like just being a Reclamation Sage or a Mana War or whatever
Yeah.
is still just totally fine.
Yeah, you're gonna play this in your green red deck that cares about colorless creatures. Totally. And worth noting that there are actual enchantment creatures and artifact creatures in this set, so it's not just blowing up non-creatures. Yeah, card's good. Again, all the caveats about castability, but I'd give Wastekeep Battle Mage a B.
I was gonna go B plus.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll stick with my B, but sounds good.
Okay.
All right, next up we've got Idol of the False Gods. This is a 2-mana Kindred artifact, Eldrazi at uncommon, and Kindred used to be called Tribal, but for just sensitivity reasons, we have changed it to Kindred at this point, just if anybody's confused with that. It's got a few abilities going on here. 1 and a colorless, tap it, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn token. Whenever an Eldrazi you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on the idol. And as long as the idol has 8 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it's a 0/0 creature in addition to its other types and has Annihilator 2, which Annihilator is something we're going to see on a few other cards, which just means when this creature attacks, your opponent sacrifices 2 permanents.
Yeah, when I first read this in the spoiler, I thought it was just 1 generic mana and tap to activate, and I still thought it was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it costs 1 plus a colorless, and it's total garbage.
Yeah, it's really rough, right? Just you're spending so much. So I guess the idea is that plus that first ability is just something to do like a mana sink when you don't have anything else to do, and you've just got so many spawn tokens from other places that this is like a kind of like a suspend 8/8 Annihilator 2 creature. That's the idea.
Don't talk about the idea. We'll give it an F and we'll move on.
No, I know, yeah, but like I'm just saying, like there is a spot for it if your deck is loaded on spawns. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so you're not going to give it an F.
No, I'm not gonna give it an F. I'm gonna give it like a D in like
Okay.
a not a, like a. I guess we should give it a synergy or a build around grade. I think a synergy D plus for the decks that just
Okay.
have 10, 11, 12 ways to do this.
Sure. I will just give it an F,
All right.
and I will never look at this card in the back.
Fair enough. What's up next?
Next, we have Solar Transformer. 2 colorless for an uncommon artifact. Enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy, and it taps for colorless. But you can also tap it and pay an energy to add a mana of any color.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, nice little mana rock here. It's
Yeah, good in the Eldrazi deck because it adds colorless,
Yeah.
and good in the energy decks because it adds energy, and
Yeah.
can be a 5-color mana fixer too.
nice. Yeah, very flexible. It's a good mana rock. And good mana rocks are good in high power sets. What do you want to give it though? It's always kind of tough to grade these.
Yeah, because so the decks that want this want it a lot, I think. But if you give it like a high grade as a colorless card, people might think you're just supposed to put it in every deck.
Exactly.
And it doesn't go in every deck.
Right. You need expensive cards. You need card draw. Ideally, good 4-drops. Ways to spend ways to use the energy. Otherwise, maybe. So any of those things make it pretty good. And if you've got multiple, obviously the more the merrier. So yeah, like you said, grade's pretty hard, but I'm gonna give it a C plus.
That's what I wrote as well.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got Glaring Fleshraker. This is 2 and a colorless uncommon Eldrazi. It's a 2/2. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, you make an 0/1 spawn token. And whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, Fleshraker deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Yeah, being a 3 mana hard to cast 2/2 on the front side, I think makes this kind of bad, even though the abilities are decent.
Yeah, the abilities are just decent though, right? They're not even that exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the damage can add up because every time you play color spell, you're dealing them 2 damage.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
at a
that's a fair
minimum, right?
point.
Like a minimum of 2 damage. With any other bonus spawns you get are going to add even more to that.
Yeah. C minus?
I'm going to go D
Okay.
plus.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I want to just say something. Chat's asking a few questions, or we've got this question a few times, so I should just probably mention it. Back for that Idol of the False Gods. Mark really wanted me to talk about this card a little bit more, so I'm going to. The Kindred artifact, or previously Tribal artifact, and it says Eldrazi. All that means it's there so that you can have, when you cast an Eldrazi spell, it doesn't just care about your creatures. There's cards like you used to see this on like instant sorceries and stuff too. So that's the reason that's there. Okay, next up, we've got Eldrazi Ravager. This is 5 in a colorless for a 6/6 Eldrazi at uncommon. Annihilator 1, so whenever it attacks, defending player sacrifices 1 permanent. It's got cycling for 2 mana. And it says, sacrifice 2 Eldrazi, return Eldrazi Ravager from your graveyard to your hand.
So would this have been better as a 7 mana 7/7 to trigger the 7 CMC stuff?
Probably, yeah.
I guess the blue green common that taps for 2 mana recurs into this very nicely.
Yeah, cast on turn 4.
Yeah.
That is nice. And Annihilator 1, it might not sound like that much, but if you haven't played against Annihilator, but anytime you have to sack like just even one thing is actually pretty annoying. You can sack lands, but you often don't want to do that. Once you get to 2, it's really backbreaking.
And that sacrifice 2 Eldrazi text, like you don't want to sacrifice Emrakul and Kozilek, but you can sacrifice spawns, right? Like there's potentially going to be a number of ways to rebuy this.
Totally. Yeah, I think
Still don't think it's great.
No, it's like solid, but not great. I think this is going to be like a C level top end card for the Eldrazi decks that want to ramp them.
I had written C for myself as well.
Great. All right. Next up, we've got kind of a cool one, Frogmere Enforcer. It's 7 mana for a artifact creature at uncommon. It's a 4/4. It's got affinity for artifacts, so call back to Mirror Enforcer, 7 mana, 4/4 affinity for artifacts, which means the spell costs 1 less for each artifact you control, but it's also got Prototype, and the Prototype cost is 3 in a red, and it's a 2/2 if you cast it for its Prototype cost.
Yeah, so it's either a Frogmite or a Mirror Enforcer.
Yeah, cute, really cute.
But there's not a single card, I think, that produces 2 artifacts. I don't think there's anything in the set that makes more than 1. So it's like not that hard, and there's not like great 1 and 2 drop artifacts out there. So this is kind of my whole red black is kind of bad unless you're 100% all in argument. This card needs to cost what? It needs to cost like 3 mana to be efficient, right? Like if you're paying 4 mana for a 4/4, you're not really doing it.
No, that sucks.
Yeah, if you're paying 2 mana for a 2/2, you're not really doing it.
Yeah, the explosivity of this card's predecessors isn't exactly there. I don't think explosivity is a word, but I just made it up. All right, so let's grade it in the context, of course, of the deck. And you play like a 2-drop artifact. Well, let's be even generous. A 1-drop artifact, 2-drop artifact, 3-drop artifact. You double spell with this at some point. It's fine. It's still just fine.
Yeah.
C minus.
Like I just don't know how you're getting into this deck. Like, anyways.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fine in that deck, but I'm still gonna give it like a D plus.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I'll give it a C minus. Cling on to hope of that black red deck. I agree with your thoughts on the black red deck though. Like of like week 1 especially, people are gonna kind of cannibalize a little bit. All right, next up we've got Breaker of Creation. This is 6 colorless for an Eldrazi at uncommon. It's a 8/4. Whenever you cast this spell, you gain a life for each colorless permanent you control. Hexproof from each color, and Annihilator 2. So notably, colorless permanents, lands included.
Yep.
It's going to gain you a lot of life when this enters the battlefield.
Yeah, it's going to gain you probably like 6 to 12 life, I'd imagine.
Really stabilizing.
Like if you sacrifice a couple of Eldrazi spawn and pay for it with 6 lands.
Yeah, one of the things...
The other annoying thing, Hexproof from each color is very powerful ability, but there are multiple red burn spells with Devoid
that deal 4 damage.
1 for 1, yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's 2 of them, I believe. So
yeah.
And you're probably only getting one attack in, where that's fine because even if this trades with a 4/4, you're still like it's still a 3 for 1.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for 8 mana, like it's it's powerful, but there's a lot of asterisks there.
Yeah, I think like we gave the other uncommon a C. C payoff for the Eldrazi ramp deck. I think this is like a C plus payoff for the ramp deck, or
Yeah,
maybe
I was gonna say slightly better. Yeah.
yeah, I could see this even being slightly worse, just like the other one being a little bit more castable. But I'm gonna stick there for now. C plus for the breaker.
Well, yeah. So notably, like this does cost double colorless.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to get those sources in somehow, and it's not going to be like every extra colorless you have. It's not like it's 6 black where oh yeah, by turn 8 I'm definitely going to have at least 2 swamps to produce this.
Yep.
Like you have to work for all of these mana sources somehow.
Totally. Yeah, you have to be the deck. That's like doing the thing with the density of it. All right. Next up, what do we have?
Twisted Riddlekeeper. This is 8 colorless for a 5/5 Eldrazi Sphinx with flying. It has Emerge for 5 colorless blue, though, which means you can cast this by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's mana value. And when you cast this spell, tap up to 2 target permanents, put a stun counter on each of them.
Okay, so this is you want to find things that make a token when they enter. Some of the Eldrazi's do that, or give you some sort of value, so you're not just like sacking an actual creature to power this out. But if you haven't played with Emerge, these things, these giant things, do come down pretty quickly. Like you play a 4-drop that's okay to sack, which not that there's that many of those, but you know they're here and there. You play this the next turn, tap
Well,
down
so
two
sacking
things,
an Eldrazi spawn token to this doesn't actually do anything.
does nothing. Yeah,
Because you can just either pay colorless with it, or you can pay. It actually makes it kind of harder to cast because you have to pay blue and colorless at that point.
yeah, and I think I'm even being a little bit generous by saying there's some things that are good to sacrifice because I think there actually aren't that many seeded in this set. Like when Emerge first was a mechanic, there's a lot of things that like you actively want to sacrifice this, and the set's pretty low on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do notable. So there is like the ideal curve is 3-drop blue creature into this on 4, right? Because you emerge.
Right, there's the
And
draw
there is
card.
a blue creature that is almost all of its value is on an ETB, which is kind of what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a curve where this works out pretty well. And you do get to tap 2 permanents. Like it could be lands, it could be creatures, it could be whatever. And there are ways to proliferate. So if you can proliferate the stun counters,
Cute.
you can potentially like there's a lot of kind of little tiny things that maybe it adds up here, but I do think that there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to make this a decent card.
Just be careful of making your opponent's creatures modified, because that, yeah, I noted that enchantments only care about your stuff, but counters are counters as far as modified goes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, tough one to grade. I think you should probably even just consider this more an 8-drop than not. And again, that's just putting in that camp of Eldrazi ramp deck payoff, and it's a solid one. Like probably another C plus with a decent buyout if you want to cast it early if you can.
I'm lower. I was gonna go C minus.
Okay. Yeah. You think this is? Yeah, it's also just like a 5/5 flyer, which just gets answered like not trivially, but it's not just a giant massive thing. I guess there's a break point right between 4 and 5 in this set, like you've been mentioning.
Yes, 5 is the amount of toughness you want in this set.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'm gonna stick with my C plus. I think the emerge adds enough, but yeah, still not a super exciting one. Okay, we got 10 cards here that are gonna be easy to get through quickly. It's the lands that we called up previously, so I'll read out one of them here. Perilous Landscape. They're all commons. They tap to add colorless. They tap to sack whatever the card is, and search your library for a, in this case, island, mountain, or plains. Put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle, and then you can also cycle it for its corresponding mana. So in this case, it's blue, white, and red. And I think one thing to call out about this that I think anybody who's looked at the set will know is Bountiful Landscape is probably one of the most important, well, the most important of the bunch here, because it is the Teamer one, and Teamer Eldrazi cares about the colorless mana more than anything else.
Yeah, so let's take a second to talk about these
Sure.
because they're, I mean, we've seen them for a long time at this point. There's a lot of them, but they are extremely good.
Yes, very, very good.
Like even without the cycling ability, these would be excellent and high picks.
Mm-hmm.
But these basically produce 4 colors of mana because tapping for colorless is something you're going to want in some spots. And so timing on these, like knowing when to sacrifice and when to keep it around for the colorless source, is going to be really important. And even if you're, just 2 of these colors, you're happy to play them. But
Mm-hmm.
even if you're a single color, if you're an Eldrazi deck and you're short a couple sources of colorless, like it's a tapped island or an untapped wastes. Like it's just really good.
Yeah, lots of like it kind of solves a lot of problems of, I mean, lands in general because it has cycling, but also the evolving wild problems of like like my land can't even tap, like it's coming untapped this turn. And fixes you. I guess worth noting too. I just mentioned the teamer one being really good, but there's probably like another tier down of like the ones that touch blue and green or red blue. Like you're gonna want to prioritize those pretty highly too if you're anywhere close to the teamer Eldrazi stuff.
Yeah, so I was gonna grade the ones that are black white a C plus. The ones that are, anything other than that, a B minus,
Mm-hmm.
and then the teamer one a B.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. Sweet.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got 1 or 2 other lands here. Yeah, we've got Snow-Covered Wastes as an actual land here, which is just a colorless basic land that also adds snow. And no, there is no reason to care about snow in this set, so it is just straight up worse than all the lands we were just talking about. Don't think we even really need to grade this. I don't think you should put this card in your deck unless you're absolutely desperate for the colorless land.
Yeah, I think there will, like I was gonna give it like a D. Like I think there will be spots
Right.
where you're like, oh, I would play a wastes here, and there are a couple of ways for searching out basics,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the only basic colorless source you can search out.
Right. Yeah, actually, something to note. Actually, the land cycle. There are a handful of landfall cards in the set too. So fetch lands play
Yes.
well with landfall cards.
Yeah.
Get 2 triggers from them. Okay, yeah, I'll join you at D. I agree. There's gonna be some spots. Urza's Cave up next. This is a land. Urza's Cave is the subtype, and it's an uncommon. Taps to add colorless, and you pay 3 to tap it. Sacrifice Urza's Cave. Search your library for a land card. Put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle.
Yeah, so very, very minor upside on this. Kind of like the same way that the snow-covered waste has minor upside if you're going to be searching out a basic. I think it's about as relevant here. I was going to give it the same grade.
Yep, I'll join you there.
Okay, so that brings us to the monocolor cards now. So just looking back, we do see more gold cards than usual with the gold common cycle, and the main themes being energy, Eldrazi, and modified things.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about how this is going to be kind of a more linear set, and I do think that you're going to settle into one of those lanes, and then once you're there, you're going to kind of know what fills out the rest of the deck. I tend to like linear sets slightly less than the non-linear ones, so I do think this set's going to be really interesting to draft, especially for the first month or so. I do think that there might be a little bit less longevity where it'll get to the point where if you see the first 2 colors of your deck, or your opponent's deck, I should say, you'll kind of know what their early curve out might look like just because they're playing that type of deck, the energy deck or the Eldrazi deck or the modified deck. So I think there'll be some very repetitive play patterns here, but looking forward to seeing how these lands especially enable potentially some 3 or 4 color builds. So there will be some variation even if the themes are the same. I think the individual decks themselves will look very different.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Like, there's I mentioned at the top of the episode where you're gonna really want to look out for like these 2-card interactions. Not exactly combos, but 2-card interactions that play well together. And your Eldrazi deck or your energy deck are gonna have different variations on that every single draft. So, yeah, cool.